Your responsibility is not to fix anybody. You can't do it. That's not your responsibility. You can't fix anybody.
Could you elaborate on that?
Good morning. Happy Friday. I have Neural Coffee in hand and it is perfect. All right, man, what a great week. Couple things. If you look down in the right-hand corner, I've had a couple questions about the change in the logo where it says the intensive returns. Yes, the intensive is coming back. We'll probably be doing something in early summer, so be on the lookout for that. I don't have any details posted, so again, just please wait patiently. If you're interested in participating in a 15-minute consultation, please go to askbillhartman@gmail.com. And speaking of which, we're going to talk about the Q&A for today, which is with Johnny. So we've talked to Johnny before. Johnny's a really smart guy. He's a chiropractic student, but asks really good questions. And so Johnny was watching the video that we did with Paul recently in regards to the origins of my model. And so Johnny wanted some clarification in regards to how the ER and the IR concepts evolved. And we got deeper and deeper into some of the treatment process too. So I think that anybody that works with complex humans is going to find this one interesting. So I appreciate you all for being here. Don't forget to go to YouTube and subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can get first dibs on the videos as they are posted up there as well. Have a great weekend, and I will see you next week.
All right, camera is rolling. Clock has started. Johnny, go ahead.
All right. So I listened to the full conversation you had with Mr. Paul Corona.
Yes.
And so fascinating. I loved it. But I wanted to, pun intended, expand on the idea of external rotation being represented by expansion and compression being represented by internal rotation.
Yep.
So I guess when you were coming up with your model, how did you bridge that gap? Because to me, expansion and ER would make sense, the most sense, to start with respiration and looking at the mechanics of the rib cage. And then from there, obviously, you see that the whole body ERs expands and IRs and compresses after that.
Yep.
But I guess, like, what was your first step in like bridging that gap of expansion equaling ER, compression equaling IR? And just kind of want to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, so when you look at the helical orientation of anything, so if you look at a tube, right? You ever see the Chinese finger trap or whatever it's called? Okay. Yeah. So that's how that works. It works based on compression and expansion. So that's how you create the shape change, right? And so that's a great representation of just simply how a helically oriented tube behaves. And so you got to go backwards in time from an evolutionary standpoint, right? And we start talking about worms and we say, well, wait a minute, that's a perfect representation of compression expansion of how you create movement. It's like, do we have anything that would be representative of that? And you kind of do, right? You have a closed cylinder of fluid volume, don't you? And so it's like, hey, how would that behave? Well, it happens to do exactly the same thing. And so how would I do that? Well, if only we had like a helical orientation, and you start looking, you go, oh, wait a minute, I have these things on the outside that man called muscles, right? And so they're oriented in very specific directions, and they're in opposing helices, right? And so if I squeeze it down, it compresses everything and it creates a downward force. Awesome. Okay, that's internal rotation. That's what we call internal rotation. So if both sides are turning inward towards each other, it gets compressed, it gets smaller and more dense, and it moves downward. And then if I move them in opposing directions, the opposite direction, everything expands and it goes upward. There's a great way to feel this. Have you ever been scuba diving?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so let me talk about what scuba diving is for a second, but again, you'll be able to picture this, okay, at least. So when you go scuba diving, you have to put weight on you to push you down underwater, right? But once you get underwater a certain depth, there's enough force above you that will push you down, okay? Like you will accelerate into the ocean floor if you allow it to happen. So you have to wear what's called a buoyancy compensator. So it's actually it's like a life vest that you fill up with air to create a balance between the forces that are pushing you down, and then you get enough expansion to hold you up. And so what you want to try to get is what's called neutrally buoyant. Okay, so literally you put enough air in the buoyancy compensator to balance the force, and you literally sit at the same place in the water. Okay, so you don't sink and you don't go up. Okay, but if you sit still and you take a breath in, you go up, and then when you exhale, you go down, and so you have this little excursion as you breathe in and out that you can, if you have some frame of reference, you can actually see yourself going up and down, and you can feel yourself going up and down. So it's a great little representation of this concept. So you take the same thing. It's like, okay, this is a fluid-based kind of a representation, but guess what? On Earth, this exact same thing is happening to you as you breathe. We don't feel it as much because we're so grounded by this perception of gravity, right? So the ground's pushing up against you constantly. And so you feel this sense of acceleration of perceived gravity, right? So you don't feel the up and down. But the reality is that as you breathe in, okay, your density is reduced, you go up. And as you breathe out, your density increases and you go down, right? That's why I always describe ER as up and IR as down, is because that's what's happening. But it's based on the behavior of how these helices change the physical shape of the cylinder, and you, sir, are the cylinder.
Gotcha. So is the resultant force of going up with external rotation, is that more based on just fluid dynamics, or is that some other physical property that I'm not appreciating?
Well, you have mass per unit area. You have because of the expansion, your mass per unit area changes, right? So that's going to alter some influences. The physical shape change, right? So you get a little bit bigger, so you're going to go up, right? So it's the wacky wavy tube guy, right? So the wacky wavy tube guy stands up when you fill him up with air, right? That's you. I mean, you have to follow the same principles. So it's really no different. You take the air out of the wacky wavy tube guy, he goes down. You see it?
Yeah. You know.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like we can't ignore the rules, right? The rules exist. We just have to recognize, like, as a human being, based on what structural elements that I bring to the table, it's like, how do I behave within the rules? That's all I'm trying to do, is create a coherent representation of what's actually happening as we move through space. Because again, it's like, I can't change the rules. And thankfully, there's very few rules, right?
Yeah. No, actually, I love that point. I love when you said, with talking to Paul, looking at all systems, like, because they all work to an extent, but they have a limit. And then you look at,
we're all looking at the same thing. We're all looking at the same thing, right? It's like we have to see, but it's like, if you get 17 people looking at the same thing, we're all looking at it from a different direction.
Right.
But the problem is that I have one guy that's looking at it from this side, one guy that's looking at it from this side, and they're not switching sides.
Yeah.
Right.
And then seeing what's common between all of these perspectives.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we just need a more representative, coherent model. And like I said, that's all I'm trying to do, because I don't care what tactics you use. That's what people are trying to sell you, tactics. Right? You go to a course and they say, well, you're a chiropractic student, right? So again, it's like, have they taught you any manipulation yet?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, it's like, well, but that's one of those foundations that is just prolific within your profession, right? It's like that's going to be one of the tools that you will use, right? And again, so that's just a tactic to get to the end result, to buy you a window of opportunity to do something else, to teach that system to behave in a certain way based on principles, right?
Yeah.
And so there's going to be a point in time where that's going to work really, really well. And then there's going to be a point in time where it probably won't, right? Because again, now we're back to the old classic conversation. It's like when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? Well, what you want to have is a few more tools in the toolbox, because I might need something else under a certain circumstance that would work better. And the only way you find that out is, like, you test the waters and you say, okay, under these circumstances, this works really, really well. And then you and I will have a conversation 10 years from now, and you're going to go, oh man, I was an idiot that first year because all I had was a hammer. Right. And then understand, and then you work with enough people, and then you develop this sense and awareness of what the probabilities are under what circumstances based on what you've done in the past. And you say, every time I do this, people react a certain way, right? Most of the time. So that's going to be the tool that I would use in that situation. Every time I do this, people react a certain way. So I'm going to use this tool under this circumstance. And then that's how you refine your skills over time. And then when you get to be an old man, you're never going to be perfect, right? You're still going to be wrong. You're still going to make mistakes. You just make fewer of them over time if you pay attention.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And I think having like something like your model with foundational principles that are coherent within a bunch of systems at such a young age for me, and such a young starting point in my career, will be super helpful to kind of guide.
Right.
But a lot of
you still have to experience the failures so you learn something, though, right? It's
absolutely.
You start with a better model, you got a much better shot at narrowing the probabilities quicker, okay? But you still got to go through the process. See, this is the mistake that a lot of people are making, is that they're relying on information to guide their process. It's like information informs, right? It doesn't represent the process. There is no cookbook, especially when you're dealing with complex human beings. You still have to do stuff. You still have to pay attention. You still have to identify. It's like, okay, what was this outcome? What are the possible influences that I have any measure of control over, right? So you remain process oriented, whether you're successful or whether you consider it a failure. You still got to go through the same process and ask the same questions. Like, okay, what did we do? What was the result? What could I have done better? Where did I make a mistake? Is there any influences that the client brings to the table that I'm not addressing? Like, so again, so the stuff that you have control over, you try to influence. The stuff you don't have control over, we call that luck, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of luck in this. Nobody likes to admit that because they want to think they have control over things. we don't have control, man.
That's so funny you say that. I caught my brain. I had a patient come back in after like a week. I worked with her. It's like, oh yeah, my elbow's feeling better. And then like my initial instinct was like, oh yeah, it must have like really worked. Whatever exercise I gave her. And then I was like, well, I have no clue. There was a week of events. So like maybe she got better sleep, like all these things. And that one experience was pretty pivotal for me.
That's humbling, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. Because like you said, you only have so much influence over one person's. They're not even seeing you for, well, maybe for you an hour or so, but in a chiropractic office, it's 30, 15 minutes, somewhere around there. They have 23 other hours of that day, and then a couple other days till they see you again.
Yep. What's the limiting when somebody comes to see you for any complaint? What's the limiting system? Like if we consider subsystems within the human body, right? What's the limiting system? You don't know.
Yeah.
So you don't know which one you're affecting. So your treatment might be the best treatment under the circumstance, but it doesn't address the limitation. And so they don't get better. And then they go off and they go do something, right? That has nothing to do with you. Right? You give them homework to do. They're doing their homework, and it doesn't help. They don't know it, but they accidentally do something that does help. And then they make the association. They go, Johnny's brilliant. Johnny's brilliant. He gave me this exercise, and it took like 5 or 6 days, but now I'm good. It's like, we just respect that. Just respect the process. Like, it's like sometimes we have nothing to do with the outcome. We just have to be there, right? Yeah.
That just makes it so messy.
No, dude, you want messy? Come on, you're dealing with human beings here in a world that we don't understand.
Yeah.
You really think you have that kind of control?
It's easier to believe that, at least.
Well, it's very ego satisfying, right?
Yeah.
You know, but again, it's like that if you can grasp that concept now, it takes a lot of the emotion away from it. It's like you're still going to have those days where you're like incredibly frustrated. It's like you're going to take responsibility for the outcome when whether it is or whether it isn't. It might be your fault. It might not be your fault, but a lot of times you just don't know. And again, so if you can look at it from a process standpoint, it takes the emotions out of it. And believe me, it's less wear and tear on you. It's like early in my career, it's like, you know, I make the joke about the scar that I have on my forehead from banging my head on my steering wheel every night. I used to drive home after work and going, man, I'm an idiot. I just don't know what I'm doing. It's like, why can't I help these people? Why isn't everybody getting better? Right. And it's just the reality. It's like, okay, from where I was in that process of my professional evolution, it's like I did the best that I could under the circumstances. I wasn't intentionally letting people down. I just didn't know enough. I didn't know how to manage the probabilities. I didn't have enough tools in my toolbox. It's like, so you got to think of this as just a total evolution, from the perspective of your own development, from your ability to apply, from your ability to make decisions, right? It's like they can hand you the cookbook, but it doesn't mean that it's going to, matter at all under many circumstances. There's people that you're not going to be able to help. And there's a lot of people that you will.
Yeah. I've thought about that. What's that?
Accept it now.
Yeah. Yeah, I've thought about that too. Like the discomfort, like as a student, you're trying to learn, like, okay, I'm going to get everybody better. Like, how am I going to do that? And then not, like you're saying, just not accepting the fact that that's just not going to happen. Like literally hinders the learning process, in my opinion, because then you don't branch out and all these other things. And I don't know, accepting that has just made it a lot easier for me.
The frustration is good. Frustration is going to drive your progress, right? I need to know more. I need to understand better. I need to refine. Like all of that is important, right? But at the end of the day, you have to say there's a limit.
Yeah. And then if you do think that you're helping everybody, then you don't think that you need to improve. So you don't refine or do anything. Right.
That's why, again, it goes back to process. It's like, that's why you have a process, right? If you look at, you ever read Jocko Willink's books? You ever read them? Okay. You know who Jocko is?
I do not.
Oh my gosh. You need to get out more. What are you in school or something? No. He's got a whole series of books on leadership, but they talk about how the military goes through a process of debriefing after every mission, where they ask the same questions. It's like, okay, what happened? What was the result? Was this the desired result? If it wasn't, where could we have improved? What could we have done better? And like, even when they're successful, they're asking they say, what could we have done better? What decisions did we make, and how did those influence that? It's like, you have to go through the same process. You have to go through a debrief every time you work with somebody. You go through whether you do it formally or subconsciously, you have to go through this process. Otherwise, you're not going to change. And if you don't change, then you're going to be that guy that has 30 years in, but not 30 years of experience.
Yeah.
You don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be that guy. You do not want to be that guy.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Well, I guess on that same note, like, how do you balance, because we were just talking about not necessarily not taking responsibility, but like if a patient does get better, then not saying like, oh, it must have been us. But then also on the same token, if they're not getting better, then we think that we need to refine our abilities. You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you balance like accepting responsibility, but also realizing it's a complex system? So that
your responsibility is not to fix anybody. You can't do it. That's not your responsibility. You can't fix anybody.
Could you elaborate on that?
They fix themselves. You're there to guide and create an environment that allows their system to behave a certain way that it didn't behave before. It is the behavior of their system that is the solution. Our job is to try to figure out the best way for them to be able to access their abilities to do that. We don't fix anything.
Okay.
You are interacting with a system, and you poke them and you go, what happened? And you go, I like that. That was a good thing. I'm going to poke you right there again. And we're going to keep poking that until it's no longer useful. And then we're going to poke something else, and we're going to poke that spot, and then we'll see what happens there. Ooh, I don't like that. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to try to find something to poke over this way. And that's it is a process. It is a process, right? Because you have no idea what you're influencing. No, all due respect to all the science that we think that we understand, and we there are some things that we that are useful for understanding as far as how we influence things, but ultimately we don't know. And be comfortable with that. That's the hard thing. It's like everybody wants to be the fixer. It's like what nothing could be more ego satisfying than to do something with someone and they go, wow, I feel so much better. And you go, way to go, me. Right? But that's not the reality. The reality is that you help them create an environment that allowed them to be successful. You're not successful. They are.
Right.
Okay. Hey, I don't want to cut you off, brother, but I got to go. I got to grab another call. Okay.
Yeah, no worries. I appreciate you squeezing me in.
No worries. Have a great
All
day.
right.
I'll see you
You
later.
take care.